welcome you to meeting number 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. Proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, which will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 sub 2 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021, the committee will proceed to its study of the impact of COVID-19 on seniors. I'd like to welcome Dr. Suzanne Dupuis-Blanchard from the National Seniors Council. Dr. Blanchard, interpretation is available at this video conference. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, and when you're not speaking, the mic should be on mute. You'll probably see me from time to time holding up one finger. That's not because I have something to say, that's to signal that there's 1 minute left in the turn of the person that's asking you a question. So without further ado, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Dupuis-Blanchard, you have the floor for your opening remarks for 5 full minutes if you need them. Welcome, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for your interest on the impact of COVID-19 on older adults. On behalf of the members of the National Seniors Council, I want to provide our sincerest condolences to Canadians who have lost a parent or loved one during this pandemic, and our thoughts go out to family members who have been separated from their relatives in long-term care facilities for the past 13 or 14 months. In addition to my role as chairperson of the National Seniors Council, I am a registered nurse for the past 30 years with experience in aging and community health, and currently involved in vaccination efforts against COVID-19. A professor at the School of Nursing at Université de Moncton, where I also hold a research chair in population aging from the Consortium National de Formation en Santé, studying aging in place, and director of the Center on Aging. The National Seniors Council was created in 2007 to advise the Government of Canada through the Minister of Seniors and the Minister of Health on matters related to the health, well-being, and quality of life of older adults. The Council currently has 11 members, including myself, that come from a wide variety of sectors related to aging, including academia, the social and health sectors, community organizations and frontline, and the private sector. In developing its advice to ministers, the Council undertakes a range of activities, including commissioning research, consulting with older adults and stakeholders across the country, and convening expert panels and roundtables. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March of 2020, the Council was in the process of implementing a 3-year work plan covering 2018 to 2021. The work plan had 4 main priorities. First, identifying measures to reduce crimes and harms against seniors. Second, examining potential objectives and elements of a national senior strategy. Third, developing an age-friendly, healthy aging policy lens to potentially examine federal policy and initiatives. And lastly, identifying measures to counteract ageism by shifting the public discourse on aging. Même si la priorité reliée aux mesures.
While the priority related to actions to reduce crimes and harms targeting seniors dates back to 2019, when we held a town hall meeting and expert roundtable in Winnipeg, in addition to releasing the report, What We Heard, which is available on our national website. I'd like to share with you a few points that remain relevant in the context of COVID-19.
That financial crimes and harms against seniors are perpetrated by different actors and assume a variety of forms, from romance scams to aggressive door-to-door sales. Of importance is that social isolation can be a key risk factor of scammers who often prey upon the loneliness of older adults who are isolated and in need of basic human contact. Poverty and economic insecurity can also make older adults more susceptible to certain scams. You can understand that with social isolation having increased as a result of the pandemic, that new frauds are being perpetrated against older adults. For example, unsolicited calls claiming to be from a private company or from healthcare providers offering home self-testing kits or even vaccination for upfront fee, or private companies selling fraudulent products that claim to treat or prevent COVID-19. However, when the pandemic began, the Council quickly shifted its priorities to monitoring the situation of the pandemic on older adults. We immediately recognized that the pandemic was having and was going to have a disproportionate impact on older adults, and that studies were appearing to take stock of the situation from various perspectives, especially in relation to long-term care. To a lesser extent, notions such as social isolation and older adults residing outside of long-term care facilities. The Council determined that its added value would be to provide high-level advice to ministers by reviewing research findings and the viewpoints of older adults and stakeholders, as well as identifying the values and principles to support the health and well-being of older adults. In response, and in prior to the beginning of the second wave, the Council prepared a report for ministers based on a review of over 40 reports regarding older adults and the pandemic. The report, titled Seniors' Wellbeing in Canada, Building on Lessons Learned from the Pandemic, will soon be added to the Council's website. If members of the committee would like to receive a copy, I'd certainly be happy to share it after this meeting. Le rapport offre 22 actions.
The report offers 22 actions informed by the evidence based on 5 main themes. Each action is further broken down into short, medium, and long-term impact. Our advice to ministers has taken into account the fundamental elements of health, aging, and quality of life for seniors. The full continuum of care from home to nursing home, the negative impacts of COVID-19, as well as the respect for federal, provincial, and territorial government jurisdictions.
Working on the impacts of the pandemic on older adults and has recently submitted advice to the ministers regarding the national long-term care standards, as these were included in the minister's revised mandate letter and budget 2021. We continue to monitor the research that is being published related to the pandemic and older adults, and we will continue advising the ministers on this important issue. We are also in early discussions related to our next work plan. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, and I certainly look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dupuis-Blanchard. We will now begin with rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives. Mr. Viss, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Blanchard, for being here today. Just, what really got me going when you first started speaking was the issue of phone scammers in conjunction with social isolation during the pandemic. And my grandmother, who's 93, my Oma, who lives on her own, made a really good friend in Jamaica who talked to her about Jesus Christ and wanting her bank information. And my Oma was about to give it to him had it not been for another family member coming into the house when the man called. And they had numerous conversations over the phone. And I will note my Oma has day-to-day care in her house through her grandchildren or her children. And but what can we do at the federal level to try to kind of temper phone scamming, because it is prevalent, it's almost ubiquitous, and it doesn't seem like that we're getting any. It's only getting worse. Would you have any recommendations about how we can combat financial crimes related that are taking place over the telephone?
Yes, thank you for that important question. It is something that we looked at when we did our consultation in Winnipeg, and that we had national representation there from experts and whatnot. And a lot of the recommendations that came forth, which would be related to what you just shared, is creating a lot of a campaign to create awareness. We all think that people know about these scams, but I'm sure that if we think back, we ourselves or others have been involved in clicking on something or receiving a call and providing information that you probably shouldn't have had. So we definitely need to be able to create that awareness about being careful, that those efforts need to continue. And actually the federal government does have wonderful resources already available, but a lot of people don't know about them. And I have to say, even during that meeting of experts that held in 2019, we presented to the experts there some of the federal resources, and a lot of them were not even aware that those existed. And one of those is the little black book on crimes and I forget the proper title, but it's the little black book, and it's been wonderfully done. It's been widely accepted by the people who do know about it, but we certainly do have to continue, facilitating or creating that awareness. But also, people do not know. Sorry, people do not know either how to report it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, thank you. That's very, very helpful, that we need to do a better job of promoting existing resources that are available. You mentioned as well, and we heard in our last panel on Tuesday, especially from the seniors advocate from the province of British Columbia, where I reside, that social isolation has led to even worse mental health outcomes for seniors during the pandemic. Briefly about the role that civil society can play, more importantly, family and friends. What can the federal government do to facilitate more interactions with seniors, maybe either through funding community groups or empowering people just in the community that want to play a role helping seniors but don't know how to do it?
Thank you again for another important topic of social isolation. And actually the council, previous to my involvement, had also looked at social isolation, and there's work on our website that actually dates from 2017. And there had been some consultations done as well previous to that report. And some of the recommendations that the council had made to the ministers at that time were, again, to increase public awareness about the importance, but also the consequences of social isolation. But it also went further to say that we need to improve access to information as well on the programs and the services that are available in the local community. Because a lot of some services are available, but and activities and but a lot of seniors don't know. And until you're in a position to seek those services or those activities to get you out of the house, you don't really pay attention to it. So we definitely have to facilitate that. But we all have a role to play in addressing social isolation. And for me, that's where age-friendly communities come into play as well. And as well as initiatives like the New Horizons for Seniors program, which I know you all know about, that plays an important role in bringing community programs and initiatives to seniors that are isolated as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
Just under a minute.
Okay, I'm good. That was a great round. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Viss. Next, Mr. Turnbull, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witness, Ms. Dupuis. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly, but great to have you, and thanks for your testimony today. Want to go back to what Mr. Viss was talking about in relation to social isolation and loneliness. Certainly it's a concern I am fully aware of in my community with constituents, both in long-term care, but also just seniors that are isolating at home for long periods of time. From your perspective, what are the health impacts that seniors have been experiencing as a result? Like, I know, just as an example, my mother has vascular dementia and has been isolated for almost 15 months in long-term care. And I've seen a very significant decline in her health, her overall physical health. But could you comment on that, the health impacts?
Yeah, definitely some important health impacts of social isolation, be it in long-term care, like you just shared, or for people in the community. And I've seen it myself in my own projects on aging in place and the impact that social isolation is having, be it on mobility, because people are not moving around as much as they used to. And that really has an impact on even on muscle loss and risk of falls, even mentally as well. Thinking about dementia, but I'm thinking mostly about those who would be maybe in the early stages of dementia and who haven't seen their extended families and whatnot. There's certainly going to be an impact when we start opening up again, and family members who interact with older adults that have been isolated and maybe who have progressed in their loss of mobility or cognition. And these are important impacts on life and in trying to keep seniors independent as well. And that's where it gets at, is that we want to make sure that seniors remain as independent as possible. And doing that is around mobility, around meal preparation, about socialization as well. And socialization is so important. I mean, we look at social isolation, and the latest research talks about it's almost like chain smoking. It's about 15 cigarettes a day, the impact on a person's body. And so if we think about that in the context of COVID, with everything else and the precautions and the stress of it, it certainly is something that seniors are living now. But the effects on mental health as well will certainly have to be addressed as we think about post-pandemic times as well.
Thank you for those comments. I
Mr.
really
Turnbull,
appreciate.
we now have Dr. Cooperman with us. I'm going to suggest that we suspend to do a sound check for him, allow him to deliver his opening remarks. You are about halfway through your turn. So if all goes well and Dr. Cooperman is ready to go, then you'll have 3 minutes when we come back. So we stand suspended for a sound check for 2 minutes. You might have missed some of the preamble. I'll give you the condensed version. Interpretation is available on the bottom of your screen. You have the choice of floor, English, or French. Please close your microphone when you're not speaking and speak slowly and clearly for the benefit of the interpreters. That's the Reader's Digest version. Now we're going to resume with questions, beginning with Mr. Turnbull, please, for 3 minutes. Mr. Turnbull, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I'll go to Mr. Cooperman. Thank you for being here, and I suppose you probably caught the tail end.
Excuse me, Mr. Turnbull, I missed one very important step. Dr. Cooperman has undoubtedly been working for days and days on his opening remarks, and I gave such a condensed version that I forgot to give him the floor. Dr. Cooperman, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then Mr. Turnbull is going to ask some very interesting questions. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair Casey. I appreciate being here, and thank you for your patience. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Linguistics and Languages at McMaster University, and I'm a member of the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging. I study two topics: the psychological and emotional well-being of seniors, and the public discourse regarding seniors during the COVID-19 pandemic. I will touch upon both topics today. I use language as my data, media and social media, stories written by seniors, and messaging by federal and provincial authorities. The present testimony is based on my own work and existing international research. Our studies of stories written by older adults show that the psychological fallout of COVID-19 on Canadian seniors has been profound. Linguistic analysis of the choice of words and topics pointed to signs of profound psychological distress among seniors. We saw an increasing use of language markers of pessimism, anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. This evidence maps well onto the Canadian statistics of deteriorating mental health. We set up a longitudinal study that uncovered the dynamics of the emotional toll that the pandemic took. Psychological well-being of seniors did not decline immediately after the global lockdown in March 2020. Rather, seniors showed emotional resilience to stress, which set off this decline by roughly 4 months. Yet, since August 2020 and up until now, the seniors have remained at the same deteriorated emotional state, the new normal. If the lockdown continues, our data predict that this state will worsen, leading to further loss of health and lives. Our analysis further confirmed robust findings that loneliness, social isolation, and pre-pandemic health issues are the key determinants of psychological vulnerability. What brings relief to seniors? Many participants in our studies mentioned success of intergenerational online projects involving storytelling and story sharing, a creative and therapeutically relevant form of communication. Yet these projects leave out those seniors that may need them the most, that is, the ones without access or knowledge to engage in online communication. Unless caretakers provide training in the use of online tools of social engagement to such individuals, the digital divide will grow and social isolation exacerbate. Given available data, I recommend to support further development of social engagement programs, especially those across generations, provide reliable internet infrastructure and access to technology to all seniors, and support education in digital literacy for seniors with the help of trained caretakers. Another topic that looms large in my current research and the international research is the rise of ageism in the public discourse on the pandemic. This discriminatory sentiment is not new, but it has now been fueled by the greater vulnerability that seniors show to COVID-19. Ageism surfaces in media as an undifferentiated portrayal of all seniors as frail, helpless, or burdensome. This negative perspective can even find support in social policies if they are formulated in terms of age as a number, rather than talking about individuals and their situation. In its most radical form, ageism surfaces as blatant disregard for seniors' lives. It is illustrated in social networks by an offensive, insulting label, #BoomerRemover. Ageism is not a prevalent sentiment in social media, but it is persistent, and so it strengthens negative stereotyping against seniors in all age groups. It has been widely reported to bias triaging decisions in healthcare delivery, as well as employment decisions against seniors. Seniors themselves absorb this negative public discourse as well. It adds to their daily stress, harms their cognitive functioning, and undermines their self-esteem. With these findings in mind, I recommend to support educational and public awareness programs about aging and its physiological, cognitive, and emotional components. In official communication, including policies and public health messaging, I recommend avoiding an emphasis on age as a critical group variable. Instead, public messaging should target socioeconomic or health-related characteristics of individuals. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to a further discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Cooperman. Now, without further ado, for the remainder of his 6-minute round, Mr. Turnbull. I'll do my best not to interrupt you over the next 3 minutes. Mr. Turnbull, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great, and how absolutely perfect that was, because what question I was going to ask you, you basically answered in your opening remarks. So thank you for that. I do have other questions that follow up on your opening remarks, so perhaps I'll get a little further in diving into the topic as a result. So thank you. You mentioned intergenerational programming as potentially a way to reduce social isolation and loneliness among seniors. And you also talked about digital literacy and the sort of divide that perhaps is there. And I think we're all present to that. I know the New Horizons for Seniors program has at times, at least in my writing, focused on some of those programs that can be delivered in a virtual format within the pandemic. And I wanted to see if, Mr. Cooperman, if you could expand on how we really address digital literacy when dealing with seniors.
Thank you for this question. We're talking about a part of the population that is the most detached from technology, and it's a sizable proportion. I think the estimate is that about 75% of seniors in the age of 65 plus, only 75% of them have access to internet in North America. So this is a question of infrastructure and providing access, but it is also a question of who will teach them to use the technology and the tools. And indeed, great strides have been already made with the help of federal and provincial funding. I know of several programs that do that. The one closest to me geographically is Cyber Seniors. So I think it is through the support of caretakers, those who actually have physical access to the seniors, and the ones who can bring the technology and the knowledge to them, that this will perhaps succeed the most.
Thank you for that. And coming out of the pandemic, assuming we are, which I think we're all very hopeful at this moment, with certainly vaccination increasing across the country and case numbers going down in most areas of the country, I think perhaps we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This sort of shadow pandemic of mental, physiological, emotional health and cognitive functioning that you spoke to within the seniors population. I wonder how we begin to address that as we move forward. Do you have suggestions for us broadly on what we can do to ensure that seniors' health and both emotional and physical health don't decline further?
As briefly as you can, please.
So briefly, the public awareness programs and the educational programs that I mentioned would be a very good partial solution. They need to be directed both at the seniors and the population at large to make sure that the awareness is there and the ageism does not proliferate.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Suite Madame Chabot pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses. My question will be addressed to Ms. Blanchard. Welcome. The National Seniors Council, you reminded us of the mandate and function of the council. You indicated to mobilize seniors, stakeholders, and experts in order to provide advice to senior government. What means are you taking to consult our seniors? And I ask the question because in Quebec, the mobilization and engagement of seniors has been very straightforward, very rigorous, given their isolation. Of course, the pandemic highlighted their isolation and the impoverishment of our seniors on matters of health, mental health, and financial health was very important in our consultations. In your recommendations and any advice you provide to government, do you deal with these issues, the impoverishment of our seniors? And if so, those who are seniors over the age of 55 or 65 often find themselves in very precarious situations. Yes, Ms. Chabot, thank you for your question. It's a very important question. Our council, well, to say mobilize, engage, can be interpreted in various ways. Among ourselves, National Seniors Council, the quote-unquote mobilization that we attempt is that each member of our council often find themselves in various provinces, so we have a very wide pan-Canadian representation on our council. Each member of the council is in close contact with the seniors in their individual communities, and I often hear around our table, the board table, stories of their daily life. They share their experiences, etc. And whenever we launch a consultation or have other activities, whether it's a round table, a focus group, there are means by which we can in fact reach out to seniors groups. It's somewhat limited as to who can in fact be contacted, but we make major efforts to reach out to them in order to get their perspectives and opinions. Personally, well, we're talking about the senior and the National Seniors Council, but we're very aware of the situation, the financial situation. They have lower revenues, fixed usually. And to come back to the council position on this, our recommendations, particularly based on the research that we have done on crimes against seniors, elder abuse, that it is those with the lower revenues that are at the highest risk. In my personal research in New Brunswick, we have done a lot of research, and we have seen that on the issue of economic situation, we took a look specifically at the Francophone sector of the population, or in the Francophone regions of our province, New Brunswick. Research has shown that if we compare the two linguistic groups, the Francophones have lower SES, social economic status. They have a lower educational status. They are more involved in precarious employment. And when they get to retirement age, they end up with a lesser revenue than their more fortunate Anglophone counterparts. This is personal experience, but it's also been reflected in the work of my fellows at the table. We always try to see if there are any other subgroups that might, in fact, be identified as being underrepresented and should be encompassed in our recommendations. Thank you very much, Ms. Dupuis-Blanchard. You know that the government has taken the decision to increase the old age security, which would apply at 75 years of age in Canada. Those over 75 plus will see a bump up in the OAS coverage. What are we going to do with the age 60 to 75? As you said, poverty rates doesn't go according to a fixed number of chronological years. Do you use any kind of subdivision by age group, between this age and that? Yes, we do, in fact. And if you are interested, I can follow up with some documentation for you on that. Thank you very much, Madame Chabot.
Please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And my first questions are for Madame Dupuis-Blanchard. Ageism. I think, seniors have certain, and as you know, seniors have paid the cost of poor planning and policy with their lives and well-being during this pandemic. And I believe the pandemic very clearly exposed the role of ageism in Canada and how elders in our communities, or not in all communities, but are really quite devalued and kind of, it's very sad. My question for you is this: can you tell us more about the role of ageism in the pandemic, during the pandemic?
Yes, certainly. And I agree with your comment about how sad it's, because ageism certainly happens in the intersection of sexism as well, and sexuality, and it's not an isolated phenomenon that happens. And during the pandemic, what we've seen is often what we can say is compassionate ageism, because, and what I mean by that is that older adults have been sort of portrayed as the passive person who should rely on someone else to receive care and support. And we've kind of portrayed them as sort of that pity kind of way of looking at things. And for sure, I mean, the impact has been phenomenal, and we can't deny that. But there is certainly a way to portray that would not necessarily conduct to ageism. And as Dr. Cooperman said in his opening remarks, we've right as soon as the pandemic was declared, and that it was sort of an older adult disease and something to be preoccupied by, and that on Twitter all of a sudden we saw the hashtag boomer remover and things like that. So we've certainly have witnessed during the pandemic that ageism is certainly present, and in even new ways that weren't there, like needing to take care of them, and that they're so passive and they're not active. It's
Yeah, I totally agree with that analysis. And in response to that, do you have recommendations how to create societies and also systems, put in place systems that aren't ageist?
Yeah. Well, it's a complex question that we are certainly at the National Seniors Council. We are just starting our work on ageism. It was one of our priority in the last work plan, and we are carrying that priority into our new workload as well, because we have ongoing work that's happening there. As far as recommendations, I think it's again to have that lens that we're able to apply and to look at new policies and programs and our discourse, the vocabulary we use, and to be able to be conscious of that, to understand what ageism is, first of all, and to be conscious of it. I would certainly say creating a lot of awareness around it. A lot of people, even gerontologists, we will say things sometimes and we'll stop ourselves and said, oh, that was so ageist on my part to say that, because we get, it's sort of part of that regular vocabulary that we use. And all of a sudden you have to stop yourself and say, oh, there's a better way to say that. And there's a positive way to say it as well.
So just because I have a limited amount of time, yeah. Canada Post, one of the programs they wanted to offer needing to be supported by the federal government in regards to social isolation and senior weekends while they're doing their postal routes. I'm wondering, Mr. Cooperman, if you could maybe respond to that, and maybe you can add on Madame Dupuis Blanchard as well. I think it's a great idea. It's an idea I certainly support. I was wondering if I could get your thoughts.
Yes, I think that would be a terrific initiative. And indeed, there are only a few professions, a few occupations that get physical access to just about every locale, every house, every domicile in our country. And Canada Post would be a great candidate for that. And I will just perhaps add to the entire discussion that whatever we as a country invest now in the public awareness programs or educational programs that fight ageism will be an investment that goes way beyond the end of the pandemic. The problem has not begun with COVID-19, and it will not, unfortunately, go away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do you have anything to add about Canada Post?
I think that would be a great idea. In my own work on aging in place, we've actually started to explore that, because we have retired employees from Canada Post in our community, and they were telling us, you should really look into this because we know that would work. And even newspaper carriers that do door-to-door, anybody who does door-to-door or regular check-ins with older adults have an access that others do not have. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Kazan.
Thank you so much.
Next, Mr. Tucker, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses today for what you shared and your work during the pandemic and your public service that you're doing, representing an important segment of our population that I think especially during the first and second wave, was overlooked. And unfortunately, the pandemic has ravaged the seniors population more so than any other segment, be it the actual direct effects of COVID or indirectly the suffering during the restrictions. And I think as a country, we should have bubble wrapped our seniors and supported them a lot better than we have. And I'd like to hear from both of you on if you've had individual stories about the seniors that have passed away, unfortunately, from COVID, and how the grieving process has changed during a pandemic and all the restrictions. If you have any individual stories you'd like to share.
I can share one personally, not with my own family, but through research that we did with caregivers who had a relative in long-term care and who hadn't been able to visit. And we heard from a designated care person that was allowed to go in, and how difficult it was to not be able to have the full family support there. And, recognizing that their relative was at the end of life, and already that's a difficult experience, the grief and the preparing for that stage in life, but to be limited in doing it only with the staff that's there, and maybe one additional person that was able to access long-term care, for example, and to have the other family members either trying to be at the window or just being at a distance. It's that lack of presence and that lack of humanness as well. And that's what they were sharing with us. They said, we knew mom was going to die. And it's not that it was a surprise. It's the fact that she did it with only myself and my sister there, and the others were just not being part of it. And they were even the ones, and she was telling me this caregiver, she said, I actually feel privileged that I was the one to be there, because that's part of my grieving process. But the other family members who weren't able to be there are living a very different grieving process, and it makes it very difficult, very, very difficult.
Have you heard, before we hear Victor's comments on this, have you heard of more seniors turning, unfortunately, to MAID? There's been some media reports in that seniors are just giving up. They're too slow to get vaccines in the province, or too slow in the country. And have you heard of that?
I've not heard of requests to MAID or thinking about MAID, but I have certainly heard of seniors wanting to stop eating. Yeah.
Fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as a personal story, I will just add one. I have a friend who works in a long-term care facility, and what she told me is that the seniors who are unfortunately in their terminal stages try to make arrangements to be at the first floor of that facility, because that allows window access. They can see their loved ones, and this makes a lot of difference. And there's that sad aspect, both, of course, for those who passed away and for their families. So the grieving has multiplied.
And Victor, have you heard of, unfortunately, more people accessing MAID in some of your studies?
Not directly, but this is something that I will definitely start paying attention to.
I appreciate that, and I understand that you have a study coming out here shortly on the loneliness and the aspects of mental health on seniors during this trying times. Just quickly, have you heard of that many seniors that are waiting to access surgical care or health care outside of COVID concerns?
Yes. Well, healthcare, of course, and the health situation is a very common topic, the most prevalent topic in the linguistic analyses that we're conducting. And what we did not expect is how much is being talked about healthcare outside of COVID-19. So the delays and the postponed surgeries, postponed care are very much on the forefront of the seniors' minds.
I'm very concerned about their healthcare system, because we know that there's a huge backlog of care that needs to be provided, and the provinces are going to be, stretched to the limits once we're on the back end. Once we finally get enough second doses out there, there's going to be immense pressures on the healthcare sector. So thank you again for the work you do.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tucker. Next, Mr. Dong, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I also want to thank both witnesses for coming to the committee today. Just a quick follow-up on MP Tucker's question with regard to long-term care to Dr. Dupuis-Blanchet. After the release of the report by our military on Project Laser, what kind of response or feedback have you received from the NSC?
From the members, I can certainly share just reactions from the members, and of course we were quite concerned. It certainly fed into the report that we were preparing at that time on long-term COVID and older adults. I think some of us, I can't say that we were fully surprised. I think many of us have been in the sector of aging and long-term care for a while and knew that conditions were deteriorating even before COVID as well. I think COVID has highlighted some situations that were there and probably increased or worsened certain or other situations. Of course, we remain concerned because we're talking about quality of life here, no matter where seniors live, be it in the community or in long-term care. And when we see those reports, it really fueled some of our recommendations and advice that we provided, and that will be made public very soon. So yeah, definitely.
Any recommendation that what federal government can do to, looking beyond the world going forward? Any recommendation that stood out for you?
We always came back to the standards, long-term care standards, not only developing them, but making sure that they're able to be implemented, make the conditions correct that they are able to be implemented, be it, and we know that it's, an FPT matter, it's at different levels, but we definitely need to find a way to be able to develop long-term care standards, but also implement them. That will be the most important part.
Thank you. To Professor Cooperman, do you have any comments or suggestions on this?
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that report, but I agree.
I want to talk about something that you are familiar with. You mentioned that the seniors, we know that for a fact the seniors feel happier when they're aging at home with their family and their community, their neighbors. Can you tell us a little bit about what social isolation does to a senior's physical health?
Yes. Well, at some level, social isolation is gives fewer reasons for a person to move. So it's all about mobility. And even though my work is mostly about social mobility and communication, but it's the drive to exercise, it's the drive to go out, to leave the bed that is undermined if a person is isolated and has, like I said, few reasons to move, to stay healthy.
I have to share with you that in my family line, there were quite a few people, actually, a few people that at the end of their life, they were patient of dementia. So is there a direct or indirect link between social isolation to dementia?
What helps fight dementia is exercising the mind and the body, right? And on the mind side, the fewer chances there are to communicate, to do intellectual work, to do cognitive training, the faster the dementia progresses. And on the physical level, it's very similar too.
And back to Dr. Dupuy-Blanchard, we've seen you talked about New Horizon programs, and we've seen the programs to up to $25,000 awarded to organizations like the National Resource Center for LGBT Aging Diversity 101 at Alzheimer's Society at PEI. The senior identify as a member of the LGBTQ2 plus community faced different additional challenges during pandemic. Any views on what else the government can do to support them?
As concisely as possible, if you could, please.
Yes, maybe not precisely, but we certainly are aware that they are a group of seniors that are more at risk of social isolation, and especially with COVID as well, just because they have a tendency, seniors who are identify as LGBTQ often say that they go back in the closet when they reach a certain age because they feel that it's not as accepted. So I think there's work to do around that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dong. Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et demie.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Blanchard, I'd like to. Well, we heard from a witness last Tuesday from a seniors organization, and in the help that could be offered as part of a solution for seniors, we knew that seniors would aspire to stay as independent as possible in their homes, at least before the pandemic. And one suggestion was for supplementary support so that they could adapt or modify their homes to allow for greater autonomy, particularly in terms of mobility. Do you think that might be a good approach? Yes, absolutely. I see this on keeping seniors in their homes. I see that very, very often. Anything that's housing, it's a very important issue for seniors. As for elder abuse, in Quebec, I participated on a committee, and there was a law that was adopted on elder abuse, to counter elder abuse, of course. I don't know if other provinces have similar legislation, but from a federal point of view, what can the federal level do about elder abuse? Well, often it tries to be discussed in terms of criminality or law. And the seniors might be saying we don't have. The police will tell you they can't go ahead with certain complaints they receive because there's no law under which they can prosecute. Are there any other perhaps mechanisms or laws or regulations rather than create new body of law federally? Well, you put your finger on the issue there. The issue of elder abuse is covered in a number of various federal programs. One has to do with research and try to collectivize a program or a policy that would, in fact, counter abuse. Well, it's very important to see, of course, how our seniors are living through the pandemic and help them now. But we have to look forward to the future once we finish with the lockdowns and other restrictions of public health directives. How can we help our seniors continue their journey?
Questions will be posed by Ms. Gazan, please, for the next 2.5 minutes. Ms. Gazan.
Thank you so much, Chair. My last question is for Madame Dupuy-Blanchard, and perhaps Mr. Cooperman, you can respond to this one as well. I'm just wondering, how you feel the government is doing in terms of mandating the Canada's commitment to the implementation of the Healthy Aging Canada as set out by the World Health Organization? Like, how are we doing in Canada with that? We'll start with you and then follow up with you, Mr. Cooperman.
Thank you for that question. The National Seniors Council is indirectly involved, I can say, and my understanding is that the Public Health Agency of Canada is currently working on how to best align with the decade of healthy aging. And there are discussions because the Public Health Agency of Canada is part of the work that we do at the council. And so there have been discussions and some back and forth on that. And my understanding is that they are working on Canada's commitment to the decade of healthy aging.
I will just add that, yes, from what we see in our studies of public messaging and federal messaging, there is the commitment is there. The alignment between federal policies and the broader context takes place. That's what I can comment on. Yeah.
How critical do you think it is for us to move quickly on this, especially in light of COVID and what we found out during COVID, or already knew but was highlighted during COVID?
Yeah. I think it aligns very well with some of the priorities that even the council is working on. When we look at the components of the Decade on Healthy Aging, it talks about healthy communities, it talks about ageism, and many of these issues are issues that are currently discussed. So I think it would be quite, I want to say easy, but it's never easy, but it would certainly align with some of the priorities that are being discussed currently.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gazan. And thank you to our witnesses today. Dr. Cooperman, thanks for your patience in working through the new reality that is Zoom and technology. To both of you, we very much appreciate the work that you do in your professional academic to share that. It will be of great benefit to us in our work, and we appreciate the patient and comprehensive way you've handled all the questions. So thanks for being with us. We're going to suspend now, colleagues, for a couple of minutes just to do the sound checks on the next panel. To our witnesses, you're welcome to stay, but you're free to leave. And thanks for being with us. We stand suspended. To order, we are continuing our study on the impact of COVID-19 on seniors. The following comments are for the benefit of the witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Interpretation is available at this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Les services d'interprétation.
Interpretation services are available during this meeting. At the bottom of your screen, you can choose between floor, English, or French. When you speak, speak slowly and clearly, and when you do not have the floor, please put your microphone on mute. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses for the continuation of our discussion. It'll be 5 minutes time to present.
Deborah Scheim, Vice President of Community Initiatives, de Fédération de...
And from the Federation of the Fédération d'Âge d'Or du Québec, the Golden Agers of Quebec, we have the director, provincial director of the Secretariat, and I think that your colleague, Giselle Tassé-Goodman, has just joined us. So welcome, Ms. Tassé-Goodman. It's a pleasure to see you. We're going to test the sound for Ms. Goodman, and we will begin with comments from Ms. Scheim.
Ms. Goodman, please, Madam Clerk.
Est-ce qu'on peut faire une très courte test du son, mademoiselle? Madame?
Oui,
environ 30 secondes.
30-second test. Can you hear me clearly? Yes? Is the sound good? Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman. Perfect. Good.
For 5 minutes, please. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, and let me start by recognizing and thanking the committee and the government for the critical and important work you are doing to support people across Canada and to support the essential community services helping our families and communities. United Way Centraide is Canada's largest funder of vital community services, and we focus on eliminating poverty and ensuring vulnerable Canadians have the support they need to build sustainable lives. Each year, United Way invests over $500 million to support over 3,500 organizations in over 5,000 communities across all provinces and territories. Of that, over $23 million is invested in specific seniors programs that help 330,000 people annually. In addition, we know that thousands of seniors, other seniors attend many other types of programming addressing such things as food security, disability services, and general community well-being. With the support of our donors and corporate partners, we mobilized during the pandemic an additional $47 million, which was aggregating both our initial investment in community and governments. And in June 2020, with the support of the federal government through the New Horizons for Seniors program, we rapidly expanded funding to over 870 organizations that supported isolated seniors. These programs offered a total of 1.3 million services to over 700,000 vulnerable seniors during the pandemic, offered by a network of community agencies in every province and territory. These programs were enabled to reconfigure existing services to meet public health guidelines, expand existing services, or support previously underserved areas. And over the course of the last year, we also funded over 5,200 community service programs through the Emergency Community Service Fund, of which 2,000 were services specifically for seniors. And to ensure that every person had access to services with support from the federal government, we rapidly expanded our 211 navigation service to all regions of Canada so that every Canadian could get help finding the services in their community. 211 saw a staggering 39% increase in contacts over prior years. Many of those callers were and continue to be seniors or those seeking support for their as a particularly vulnerable group, and the extended shutdown of public activities affected the many community programs and services that those already vulnerable seniors relied on to combat isolation, to build social networks, to access culturally appropriate food, to receive mental health support, and to stay active. United Way has worked with municipalities, public health entities, foundations, and frontline agencies to coordinate pandemic community response. We collectively mobilized quickly around community response tables to problem solve such things as how to maintain Meals on Wheels delivery, to transition in-person contact to phone check-ins, to assist seniors with prescription and grocery delivery, and to pivot seniors to online gatherings to maintain those vital social connections. Based on the context of each community, Centraides identified and responded to the needs of those who are facing barriers. Some of the barriers that we identified are living on low income, being a member of a minority group, or being over the age of 80, because those were identified as considerations on overall vulnerability. The most frequently funded programs were food and grocery support, outreach to prevent and address isolation, and then hygiene and cleaning supports. I'd like to leave you today with 5 key takeaways. First, the last year has shown the level of innovation and agility that is possible with the community services sector. We do not want to lose that spirit of innovation and collaboration as we emerge from the pandemic. Second, it is important to focus on the role that caretakers play as part of the continuum of care. It's an essential part of our response going forward that caretakers have the supports they need in order to keep seniors at home safe, secure, and healthy. Third, partnerships and collaborations have been the foundation of the innovation and response that we have seen over this past year. We can and should encourage collaboration and coordination between organizations rather than foster competition. Seniors and their caregivers will be better for it. Fourth, we would be remiss to not mention the disproportionate impact of COVID on communities of color, Black, Indigenous, and South Asian specifically. Our efforts must double to address systemic racism and the barriers and inequities they create. And finally, one of the lessons for funders is the need for flexibility. Local leadership knows what they need, and with the right supports, they will find the right solutions. We expect that services are going to start costing more and that agencies will not be able to deliver the same level of services over the coming months. These organizations have stepped up during this crisis, and they are under great stress. We need to help them maintain their operations. The United Way Centraide Network remains committed to supporting seniors as Canada emerges from the third wave and as we turn our attention towards building back better. If we want a strong and equitable recovery that supports healthy aging, we need to support the community-based and community-led organizations that support seniors where they live. This is particularly true for seniors from the most marginalized communities, including Black and Indigenous communities, and those living in vulnerable circumstances. I'm happy to speak further to any of these issues as questions. Thank you very much for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Ms. Scheim. Suite le réseau FADOC.
Now we'll follow up with the Fédération FADOC. Ms. Gisèle Tassé-Goodman, are you going to speak on behalf of your group? Yes. 5 minutes is your time, and welcome to the committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Gisèle Tassé-Goodman, President of FADOC. I'm accompanied by Denis Prudhomme, Executive Director of our organization. First, I'd like to thank the members of the committee for the invitation. FADOC is a group of people aged 50 and over and has 550,000 members. In each of our political representations, we wish to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life for seniors. Sadly, seniors were the first victims of COVID-19. People who receive only old age security and guaranteed income supplement benefits must live on less than $19,000 a year. Living on this amount was difficult enough before the pandemic. The onset of this social and health crisis exacerbated their distress as prices for basic necessities has increased. In addition, lockdown measures have meant that many seniors have temporarily lost their circle of support, resulting in additional costs, including the use of delivery services. The government finally provided a one-time payment to seniors who were struggling to make both ends meet last summer. Obviously, FADOC would have preferred that the government accelerate the implementation of the old age security bonus promised in 2019. This enhancement was finally announced in the last federal budget. Any form of support and enhancement is welcome, but FADOC believes that people aged 65 to 74 should also benefit. The government should revise this proposal in order to avoid creating two classes of seniors. As president of our network, I must speak of the elephant in the room. Much has been said about long-term care facilities. Many seniors have paid the price for failing healthcare systems in this social and health crisis. The reality is that provinces are chronically underfunded in the healthcare systems by the federal government. It's true that some money has been injected as part of the current crisis, and that the latest federal budget proposed investment in long-term care. But this support is neither recurring nor proportional. Provincial and territorial healthcare funding accounts for 40% of their budgets, while Canadian governments fund only 22% of these expenditures. According to the Conference Board of Canada, the current rate of growth of the Canadian health transfer will result in the federal share of health care funding falling to less than 20% by 2026. Therefore, our FADOC is requesting the federal government to increase the indexation of Canadian health transfer by 6% annually, the level at which it had been growing before 2017. In addition, the Canadian health transfer must take into account the aging of the population in the provinces and territories. And finally, the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted significant gaps in financial literacy and affordability to technical internet, for example. As a result, many seniors have been doubly isolated, physically and virtually. Réseau FADOC, network of FADOC, is actively working to strengthen digital literacy among its members through training workshops. This type of initiative deserves increased support from the federal government. Furthermore, internet service packages are very expensive and seniors' incomes are limited. It's important that the federal government improve competition for these services so that lower-cost internet packages are available to all. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for listening to us, and we're prepared to answer questions. And I will, of course, hope to answer your questions. Thank you. We're going to begin with questions, beginning with Mr. Tucker for 6 minutes. Mr. Tucker, you have the floor.
I believe Brad is up on the schedule.
Mr. Viss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both witnesses for appearing today. Ms. Shaimi, did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, perfect. On the fourth point you raised, you said that the impact of COVID-19 on communities of colors was disproportionately more impactful, and you mentioned the South Asian community. Can you explain what data you used to reach that conclusion and how it impacted the South Asian community? And I ask that because approximately 30% of the people I represent are of South Asian descent.
Thank you so much for the question. We looked quite broadly in preparing our statements for today at communities that were adversely affected by COVID. And I would say that we know that the South Asian community has been disproportionately affected overall in the pandemic. And so we draw our conclusion from that. We're happy to provide you with some data and statistics following this meeting if that would be helpful for you. I would say one of the things that we do know is that many of the South Asian community, much of the South Asian community that is working in essential work also lives with combined families. And so they were putting their families, including elders, at risk when they were coming home from the jobs that allowed all of us to eat and get our prescriptions delivered and food delivery and Amazon delivery and things like that. So I think that it's just drawing conclusions from what we know of the community, but happy to provide additional information.
Well, that's actually very helpful. And I do know that there's two groups in my community, the Filipino community and the Punjabi community, especially, who work in long-term care, and there were local instances just as you described. But was there anything particularly related to seniors in those communities though, or was it just through the fact that some of their family members that they're living with are taking COVID home because of the vulnerable situations they found themselves in while working?
I would say it's the latter.
Okay, thank you so much. My riding also has I have a very, very rural riding with a large population base in the southern part. And in the community of Boston Bar, one thing that came to mind during the pandemic was that there was lack of transportation to get groceries. They have to go down the mountain passes to get to the community of Hope, which is outside of my riding. And they lost their community shuttle bus. Most of the people up there can't afford a vehicle. There's not a lot of money in that area. What has United Way found for seniors groups and seniors living in isolation in rural Canada during the pandemic, or if you have any thoughts on that point?
Sure. I would say there's a couple of things. I think my colleague here talked about interconnectivity with, have access online services and to get supports, mental health, or speak to your doctor or what have you. The transportation issue was huge. We also saw that in a lot of the rural communities, there was additional cost for food, right? Whether it's delivering the food or the actual cost of the food is more, especially in more remote areas. And so the dollar has to stretch that much further for those seniors that are living in those remote and rural areas. But the lack of transportation is a significant issue. You're further from your neighbors in rural and remote areas. So I live in urban downtown, there's lots of supports locally for I can knock on my neighbor's door in a rural and remote area. That's harder to do. And so those natural communities of caring are harder to organize and manage in a rural and remote area.
Mm-hmm. As it relates to this impact of the COVID-19 impact on seniors, you mentioned the cost of food going up in rural areas. Has the increase to the cost of food had a negative impact on seniors through inflation?
I can't speak specifically to that. Again, happy to find information if that would be useful for you. But I think our experience in working and funding in the rural and remote areas was that not only was it more expensive, but there was also a supply-demand issue, right? That there may have been, for example, we had a lot of trouble getting, not to the food issue, but getting technology to folks because there was no iPads available. So everybody was saying, yeah, we get seniors iPad and connect them, but it was really hard to get those and purchase those in bulk for some communities. But I would say generally the food went up and lower income families struggled in rural and remote areas to be able to afford what they might have previously been able to pay for.
Yeah, I found that in the community of Lillooet, for example, there's only one place where you can purchase groceries. And I heard from a number of my senior constituents that they can't afford to buy cauliflower anymore because of the inflation in the cost of groceries in those communities. And for me, if I have to pay $5 or $6 for a head of cauliflower, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're a senior living on a fixed income, those price increases, which I think were much more heightened for essential food items like vegetables, is a real big deal when you were planning on only paying $2, for example, and when you're living on a fixed income.
And we know that communities, low-income communities, often struggle to afford healthy food. So I think there may be food available, but it's not always healthy, fresh vegetables and fruits, as you alluded to in your comments. So I think that's an important factor as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for appearing today, Madame Goodman. I wish I had more time. I had a few questions for you as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We may get back to you, Mr. Viss, and you might get another turn. So, Mr. Long, please, now for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and thank you very much to our presenters. Very good presentations. And my questions are for you, Ms. Scheim. I want to start by thanking you and United Way for this outstanding work and services you deliver right across the country. And certainly here in St. John Ross, the executive director is Alexia Elis, who does a fantastic job. She's been in her role now for just a little over a year. So I just want to talk first and foremost about the Emergency Community Support Fund, which was the $350 million that our government announced to, support community organizations. $9 million went to the United Way Centraid Canada for seniors. Certainly in my riding, I think there was 22 applications, 13 organizations received funding. One of them was Meals on Wheels in St. John, which got a $12,000 grant. And, Meals on Wheels obviously provides, hundreds of free meals to seniors who need that support, especially during the pandemic. So my question to you, that's a great example of the kind of, service needed from community organizations and, who understand what seniors need. So to continue the positive contribution to our society, how do we better leverage the work of longstanding partners such as the United Way?
Well, thank you for that question. Really appreciate the feedback as well. And for a relatively new ED in your local community to deliver in this year was quite extraordinary. I mean, I would say that we're really pleased to see that there's attention being paid to the charitable and nonprofit sector in the budget for 2021. And we welcomed the announcement of the Community Services Recovery Fund, which is now focusing on modernizing, adapting, and the resilience in the community going forward. We know that for that kind of resource to be successful and for us to work in partnership with government and others on delivery of that, we want to make sure that the supports for the longer term change management for organizations to adapt is reasonable, that we have the supports for system-wide thinking like around IT and fundraising and HR capacity, and that there is a role for national organizations to play along with intermediaries or CFC and CRC. We generally fund to general operating costs as the United Way, not project funding, and more support for that general operating costs from the federal government would certainly help ensure that organizations serving seniors and other vulnerable populations could continue to do their good work locally in the community and be really responsive to what's happening as we build back and come out of this third wave. And we're really focused on that system change thinking of how we as a sector can transform with the learnings that we have gathered through the last year and a half. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and I thank you for that. In addition to the $9 million that we funded through, the United Way Centraid Canada, we also allocated an additional $20 million in funding for New Horizons for Seniors programs. It does, obviously we all know what the New Horizons program does, the impact in all of our ridings. It helps organizations mobilize to help seniors, through more community-based programs. Do you think this additional investment and flexibility provided will help community organizations have the means to carry out projects?
I can't speak specifically to the parameters of the 20 million that you're referring to, but what I can say is that I think the funds that the federal government and provincial and municipal and regional governments contributed to ensure that services were continued and could be expanded and shifted through the pandemic were essential to all our collective response across the country. And that ongoing and sustained investment is really important as we move forward. As I said before, being a long-term funder in the community, we do really appreciate the flexibility for organizations to spend on the solutions and the programs that they feel are best suited for their communities. So as much flexibility as we can provide to organizations to use funds. And the longer term multi-year funding is always helpful to continue to build out those programs across a community over time.
Thank you for that. I read an article actually today. It was in the Delta Optimist. It was obviously BC based, but it was about the United Way Healthy Aging. It was called the United Way Healthy Aging, Connecting Seniors Through a New Digital Project. And some of the stats, I'll just quote here. So, when the pandemic forced everyone into social isolation, many turned to technology to stay connected. This is true for seniors as much as anyone. Research shows that device ownership and use among older adults has grown markedly, and 65% of Canadians over 65 now own a smartphone, and 83% of them use it daily. So, can you give us your thoughts or comments on what could we do to help enhance that, to help, keep seniors connected, especially what we've seen over the last year?
We tend to clump seniors all together. And as I think I've heard some of the previous folks on the panel speak to, there's different stages of aging, and especially now, my father is 86 and he is using an iPad to do his hearings. He's a lawyer, and he's on his phone every day. So I think we tend to generalize. There is an issue of ensuring connectivity. And making sure that there is connectivity available across the country, that it's affordable and accessible to all. And that's a big piece of what I think the federal government can support. I also think there's training and education at the local level for seniors who may not have the facility to work with digital technology.
Are you looking, I'll just jump in, is United Way doing this in other areas across the country, or is this just a pure pilot project?
Very quickly, please. We're out of time.
What you're speaking to is a very specific project, but across the country, I would say United Ways have been deeply involved in ensuring that seniors and other vulnerable populations have access to technology, have the connectivity, have the training and support. And more importantly, not more importantly, but equally importantly, that the community agencies that are providing the services have the infrastructure to support them, and that they themselves are equipped. And we often forget that those organizations need that infrastructure and that ongoing support as well, so that they can reach those seniors. It's not just about the seniors having that. So those are all important pieces of the puzzle to ensure that we can continue to reach vulnerable seniors who are living at home or in congregate care.
Thank you for your time.
Suite Madame Chabot pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Chabot, 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to our witnesses. We have a wealth of riches today on committed individuals and organizations, very, very useful for the purposes of our study. My question will be addressed to FADOC, either of the two witnesses. As everyone is aware, or as you are aware, you participated at various levels. And you figure in a recent federal budget to improve OAS, but beginning at age 75, and only a little bit later down the line. I do have the same concern that it might create two classes of seniors, and it will be a first. The old age security is supposed to apply from age 65. What will be the impact of creating, the potential for creating two classes of seniors? Well, I'll start, and I'll allow Mr. Prédhomme to perhaps complement my answer. First of all, thank you for the answer, for the question, rather. Social inclusion is absolutely imperative to live a healthy old age. The price of gas, for example, is a concrete reality for most people, and it is even more difficult for those who are on OAS or on income support. Now, the increase at age 75 to the OAS will cause a discrepancy in treatment, inequality, if you will. Yes, different way. And we hear it from a lot of people. There's for people. Look, people over age of 65 or 75 have rental increases on an annual basis. They need to live with that. A dozen eggs is not the same price as it was even 1 year or 2 years ago. Fruits and vegetables have gone up in price tremendously. And this is very difficult for the food bill at the end of the month for these seniors, 65 years of age or 75 years of age. And as you know, there are more female seniors than male seniors. And these widows, in some cases, become the main support for their elderly parents, and they don't have any revenue because they're giving of their time in order to assist family members as caregivers. In a number of other cases, many men and women, mostly women again, that stayed home to raise their children and did not participate in the active labor force during their earlier years. Therefore, they don't have very much in savings in a pension. So at 65, if they get OAS and the supplement and the GIS, as was said, it's $18,500 a year if they live only on that. This is why we're looking for a 10% increase be granted to all seniors 65 years of age or over. Denis, I would add that it does have there is a dichotomy here. If there's a greater need at age 75, there's a greater need at age 75. But if we improve or enhance old age security, they can continue to get it until they reach a certain threshold of salary, and then it is reimbursed in a sense. So we should have one improvement for all seniors 65 and up. Thank you. In light of their most recent budget, we can see that the government is going to support provinces with various support measures. I don't know. I think it's more an interference in provincial jurisdiction, but in any case, that's my opinion. It's a provincial jurisdiction to ensure health care services. Do you think that these one-off type of supports are just displacing or postponing what should be permanent, ongoing financing? Well, thank you for the question. These payments are only kicking the can down the road, as they say. Those who need the most help will go from 150,000 as 600,000 in between 1930 and 40, and then it'll be 700,000. If today we can take care of these people who need care now, how do you think that we're going to be able to plan for a greater needy population later? We have to index an age factor, if you will. There should be indexation based on the aging of the population so that the provinces can take better care of their senior citizens. Thank you very much.
Minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. My first questions are for Rizo. Just in response to the Liberal government's announcement, to increase, payment for seniors over the age of 74 and excluding seniors 65 to 74. You joined forces with the Canadian Association of Retired Persons and the National Association of Federal Retirees, collectively more than 1 million seniors, to call out the federal government on this. My question is this: you called for raising the old age security benefit by 10% for all eligible seniors. Can you tell us why you called for this change and how you came about arriving at this number?
Oui, bien entendu.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Well, it's quite straightforward. The government's argument was to assist individuals who are in most need. And this is why they chose, and this is why we chose and agreed with 75 age. Now, you can continue to collect or receive benefits on OAS to a certain salary threshold. After that, I think that they should perhaps have used the GIS rather than the OAS because they are the most needy. This is why we say they're going to create two categories. It won't help those who are the most needy. I think it's a mistake.
When you say the most needed, can you expand on that?
Oui, bien entendu.
Certainly. Those who are most in need are those who live only on these benefits, OAS, GIS. And that comes to about $18,000, $19,000 a year. Now, if you take the market basket, the poverty line, depending on where you live, is approximately $19,000 to $21,000 a year. So we can't just help those over 75 years of age. It's not necessarily going to be of help of those who need it the most, because some actually won't need it even though they're 75 years of age. If I may add to what Mr. Prudhomme has just mentioned, those who live with OAS and GIS also have to pay for their medications, their grocery cart. And they might have to get to the cashier and have to withdraw some of the choices they made. They can't afford to proper dental care, for example, because $18,800 a year, you have to pay higher rent from year to year. The telephone bill always gets more expensive, and so forth. And if any unforeseen event occurs, it becomes a drama. It becomes a luxury item.
Both of you, and I have deep concerns about the level of poverty in which seniors live in this country. Including women. We often talk about seniors working their whole lives, and many women worked at home and don't benefit from pension plans. And, many women particularly live in seniors, and certainly more heightened in certain groups. Certainly Black, Indigenous people of color have higher rates of poverty. In saying that, one of the things that I put forward in this past session is a motion in support of a guaranteed livable basic income in addition to current future government programs and support, meaning that to take the current guaranteed income, make it livable in addition to other programs and support. Unfortunately, our bill in support of universal pharmacare was voted against. Do you think putting in place a guaranteed livable basic income, making it livable, in addition to current and future government programs and support, would be a game changer for seniors in this country?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. And the answer would be yes, absolutely. In various recommendations that we've made to government, three scenarios. The market basket adjusted by 7%, and as you've mentioned, a guaranteed adequate living wage. So there are possibilities. I mean, it doesn't take everything into consideration, but we've also indicated to the federal government that those who don't have much savings or income, if they have to break into their RRSPs or RIFs to get vision care, it should at least they should be at least allowed to withdraw that money tax-free.
Mr. Prudhomme.
Thank you, Mr. Prudhomme.
Please, for 5 minutes. Mr. Tucker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sean. Didn't come through that he called my name, but thank you so much. We were talking today a lot about the different classes of seniors. Unfortunately, that the last budget changed. So as we were discussing how the one-time OAS has increased, and it seems to me, and Ms. Goodman, you brought it up, but we didn't talk about the GIS. Would you be agreeing that it would be much fairer to increase the GIS versus the OAS?
Oui, merci pour la question.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, in fact, if you take those who are most in need, 65 and up, it should have been GIS that would be targeted.
Goodman?
Oui.
Yes, precisely. Just as Mr. Prudhomme has said, they should have improved by $50 a month, let's say, the GIS, because these are the people most in need. Now, as was mentioned a little bit earlier, those who receive the OAS, and I can't remember exactly what the threshold is, but it's 78,000, I think. The amount is not the same for an individual who has $30,000 and somebody who receives over $75,000 in pension income. So what we're asking the government, the federal government, is to increase the GIS for by at least $50 a month for all recipients.
Some of the reports that we're hearing in the media about the pandemic relief has gone to the most well-off than versus going to families and seniors that need the most amount of help. And that's where I question why that was done, and especially that age group. I find in my office, the seniors that I've been talking with, it's more the younger seniors that are in tougher financial situations than older. And you'll find low-income seniors in every age group. But if you were going to design a program, if you think of what that 60 under 75-year-old, the decades that they lived versus the ones that older, there's not just the years that they would have worked and perhaps accumulated more savings, but it's the lower income seniors that are just retiring or have retired in the last 5 years that I feel the worst for. They went into the last time of hyperinflation, thinking last time that our country was facing runaway inflation with less dollars. So they had more debt, be it more mortgages, or what occurred were once interest rates skyrocketed for those individuals back in the 80s and their wealth really took, not a wealth, but their savings account were negatively affected by inflation, more so than the older ones, or the older ones who went through that time period, if they were fortunate enough to had work at the time, they're actually did better off. So I question why the Liberals have drawn that line and made two different classes, but it brings up the point of inflation, and you talked about it before. What are you hearing from seniors on the, we know anecdotally that because the cost of living is up, they're making different decisions. But I'd like to hear maybe if you had some firsthand stories of what seniors, the decisions they're making because of inflation and the cost of living being up. Either witness. Ms. Goodwin?
Oui, Denis, je vais te laisser répondre.
I'll let Denis answer that question. Well, yes, a few comments. First, they have to make more and more difficult choices. The cost of groceries has gone up tremendously. Even the delivery of groceries, because in many cases they're in lockdown or they can't leave their home. Not only they're isolated because of technology in some cases as well, lack of access to telecom. And in some smaller areas, smaller communities, the sole grocery store is closed, the post office closed, and they have to travel to get their goods. Thank you, Mr. Predom.
Please, for 5 minutes. Mr. Vaughn, please.
I was just reading my notes. I apologize. It's great to see the Conservatives supporting the boost to the guaranteed income supplement. They voted against it, of course, when we did it in the last mandate, which was a landmark move to help reduce seniors' poverty. And I'm glad that they're coming on board to understand that seniors need this help now. Just with Deb Scheim, just to ask about some of the collective efforts and the individual efforts. Of course, individual transfers are important, but we had Dr. Cooperman from McMaster was here earlier as part of our witnesses, and he said there was a real pivot point in sort of the end of August, start of September in terms of the major indicators he was following around seniors' health, which is interesting because in the first wave of support for seniors in the pandemic, we increased direct transfers to seniors, but we were convinced by the provinces that they needed support too. And so we did a block transfer. The state restart agreements that kicked in September was a $22 billion transfer to the provinces. Did you receive funding from provincial governments at that point to sustain and extend your services through the safe restart agreements?
Is that question for me?
Yeah.
So we did not at United Way Centraide, we're the national office, and I can't speak, again, could gather that information for our local United Ways to see if they received any provincial funding for services in their community.
Because part of that block funding as well were direct transfers for long-term care. Doug Ford in our province of Ontario boasted that he was going to put an iron ring around long-term care with these new federal dollars. But we saw even worse results in the second wave than we saw in the first wave. And the only real iron ring that was put around seniors' residents was a legal one, which prevents families from suing for the neglect of care. Did you see any long-term care specific engagements from the provinces, or were we better to spend our money directly with frontline services than transfer to provinces?
So as I referenced in my comments, we really work with seniors living at home. So my area of expertise and the information I gathered from our locals does not address the issues and challenges of long-term care. And I would leave that better equipped for others to speak to that specifically.
Sure. On aging in place, there are some that says we should just do direct transfers to individuals through CPP and OAS and just send people individual checks. In terms of seniors, we also heard that collective action, engagement in social settings, physical activity, being checked in, that the community care was as critical to seniors' health and outcomes. In that regard, is it just a question of transfers, just a question of dollar amounts being sent in checks, or do we need to also build systems that provide additional supports to help people age in place?
So thanks for the question. Yes, I think my comments alluded to the fact that we need to continue to support the community-led and community organizations across the country in order for them to have the infrastructure and the adaptive programming to respond and support seniors living at home and their families, the caregivers explicitly, and that creating that fabric of network of organizations across a community is essential, not only for those organizations and their services, but they're often the ones to support and engage volunteers and in being active in their community. We want seniors aging at home as much as they possibly can, and we need to build the infrastructure to support them.
But
and that comes many times through organizations.
Because if you have mobility issues, you may have a check to go to the grocery store, but if you can't get up the stairs or down the stairs to get to the kitchen or out the house to get to the supermarket, if you don't have the supports around to realize the menu, there's no point having money if you get to the store if you cook and clean afterwards.
And I would use 211, which is a helpline across the country, as a perfect example of why we call ourselves human services, which is that is a phone line. You can also go on and search. So somebody like myself could go on and search for a service and come up with some solutions and make some calls. But a senior might need help even prioritizing what the issues they are, that they have are, and talking to a live person. They can often work through with that individual, navigate which services, where do you go, and they can also identify if those are seniors that are in need of support. So the human part of the human services sector is really essential to ensuring that people can live, and that we support the continuum of care that's needed for seniors in our communities.
And just on the individual transfers, people talk about the guaranteed income supplement. We, of course, boosted that by 10%. They don't talk about the GST rebates, and that was about $400 per person across the country, which is also a direct transfer to individuals, as well as now the new top-up for people over the age of 75. All of these measures collectively, to Madame Tassé-Goodman, all of these, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which check gets bigger from the government. What matters is that the household contribution grows. So whether it's CPP, OAS, GIS, GST rebate, or even the refund on a price on pollution, as long as all of the federal transfers to individuals increase, seniors do better. It doesn't need to be one or the other.
Réponse brève, s'il vous plaît.
Very short answer, please. I will try to respond to that. Yes, it's an improvement, but it's not necessarily equal unless you disregard the age differences.
I'm going to suggest one question each pour Madame Chabot and Ms. Gazan. Madame Chabot, avez-vous une question finale?
Do you have a final question, Madame Chabot? 1 minute for you, one for Ms. Gazan. Thank you very much, Chair. You said something quite interesting in the comments on community aid, the assistance that we give for keeping seniors in their homes, to maintain their independence and such. So the question's addressed to Ms. Scheim. Do you think that there's sufficient flexibility in these support programs so that it can be adapted by different organizations or community groups to meet their specific needs?
Benefits of the way in which we collectively responded through this pandemic was with great flexibility, and funders, government included, stepped up and said, local leaders, you tell us what you need and how you need to spend those funds. And that allowed that creativity to happen at the local level. We do not want to lose that, because that is really essential for us to be able to solve locally the problems that are in front of us, and to work with the expert in that community, the many experts in those communities, to figure out what are the best programmatic and other supports for ensuring that seniors can live at home.
Thank you, Ms. Scheim. Last question for you, Ms. Gazan. Ms. Gazan, are you with us? Okay, you get the last word, Ms. Gazan. Go ahead.
Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm having trouble with my buttons here. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I was struggling there. Just to follow up with Rizzo. So I spoke to you a little bit about guaranteed livable income, and part of the reason I discussed that is because I really believe that a lot of seniors in the country don't live in dignity. They're not given what they're provided to live in dignity. I'm wondering if you could provide some thoughts, further thoughts on what you believe is creating age-friendly care environments, to speak a little bit about that. And what are your thoughts about aging in place?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. If we want to have a care-friendly society, we have to direct the help to the seniors. Experts are telling us that we should be doing this, but it's taking too much time to get there. As for seniors, if we want them to live independently at home, we have to provide the care that they need and the services they need at home. So budgets should be flipped on their heads. Let's put the focus on in-home care rather than hospital care. Thank you, Mr. Prudhomme.
To all of our witnesses for being with us today. The United Way is very prominent right across the country, not just in seniors programs, but in many others. And we very much appreciate the work that you do and for being with us. A FEDOC très important dans le province.
A very important partner in Quebec, of course, and thank you very, very much for your work in your communities, and thank you very much for your appearance today and your testimony. You are constantly being invited here with a reason.
Colleagues, do we have consent to adjourn? I see consent in the room. Thank you. We stand adjourned. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend, everyone.